Hello students, welcome back again. I am Samapti Sinha Mahapatra, your zoology teacher teaching in Sri Chaitanya Institute. Students, we were already discussing about the chapter body fluids and its circulation, and we were done with the different body fluids, blood and lymph, the blood drooping, the clotting factors, the coagulation. And today we are going to start with the next part, which is human circulatory system. First of all, I have given you some information regarding the heart. I have written that heart is derived from mesoderm. And heart is slightly tilted towards the left. If you see in the thoracic cavity, it is present slightly tilted towards the left. Now talking about the wall of the heart, just like your lungs were made up of double membranous pleural membrane, in the same way your heart is covered with double membranous outermost pericardium, and this double membranous pericardium has a fluid in between which is called as pericardial fluid. Inner to your pericardium you have a muscular layer which is actually maximum percentage in your heart, that is the heart muscles myocardium. The myocardium, the heart muscles that you have already read in your animal tissues, is the next layer after your pericardium, and the innermost layer is called as the endocardium. So here I have written, yes, definitely 95% is made up of your cardiac muscles, which is myocardium, also having a junctions. If you remember, those junctions are called as the intercalated disc. Alright, now we are starting with the structure of the heart, but first I have started with the basic external structure of the heart, how your heart is going to appear if you look from outside. We know that humans have got 4-chambered heart, 2 atria small sized, and then you have got 2 ventricles. From outside your atria appears like leaf, and you see certain boundaries between the atria and ventricles, and between the atria and between the ventricles itself. Those boundaries are called as sulcus. The boundaries are called as sulcus. Also students, remember, whenever you make this structure, remember that this part is the base, not the apex, and this part is the apex. So base and apex, atria towards the base and ventricles towards the apex. Now talking about the boundaries, the boundary that you see between atria and ventricle, that is called as atrioventricular sulcus. That is called as atrioventricular sulcus, or that is called as coronary sulcus or coronary sulcus. Also the boundary that you see between both the ventricles, that boundary is called as interventricular sulcus, between the ventricles. Next we are going to see very important internal structure of the heart. Alright students, now let's move to the very important part of the chapter, which is the internal structure of the heart. When you talk about the internal structure of the heart, you can see that the questions have been asked in NEET 2018 and 2010, so quite important for the NEET 2020. Now looking at the internal structure of the heart, we know that human heart is 4-chambered. It has got 2 atrium and got 2 ventricles. On the right side you can see right atrium and right ventricle having the deoxygenated blood, and on the left side you have got left atrium and left ventricle having the oxygenated blood. I have shown on the blood vessels having the deoxygenated blood with the blue color, and all the blood vessels having oxygenated blood with the red color. Now students, first look at the basic structure. When you compare the ventricles wall, you will see that there is a thicker wall in case of the left ventricle. Why is it so? Because the left ventricle have to pump blood to the whole body part, and that's the reason why your left ventricle is having comparatively thicker wall as to the right ventricle. Also between these 2 ventricles there is a septum, there is a boundary, there is a division which is called as interventricular septum. Now students, in the right side of the heart, you have got all the deoxygenated blood. Now this deoxygenated blood is coming from your all body parts. Tissues which is utilizing oxygen is releasing CO2, and that deoxygenated blood is brought by two blood vessels. From the topmost part of your body, the blood is brought by the superior vena cava dumping into the right atrium, whereas from the lower body parts, the blood is brought by inferior vena cava dumping again, can you see, in the right atrium. So from the top body parts, superior vena cava, from the lower body parts, inferior vena cava, bringing the oxygenated blood and dumping into the right atrium. Also in the right atrium, you have got a sulcus. You have got, a sinus. Sinus is a cavity. The sinus, just remember students, is quite important with related to the circulation of the heart. This sinus is called as coronary sinus. Coronary sinus, if asked, is present in which atrium? So you will have to say that it is present in the right atrium. Also, the blood, the deoxygenated blood from the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava, when dumped into the right atrium, is then passing where? Is then passing to the right ventricle. Can you see some pink color thing on the wall of the ventricles on both the sides? I will tell you the function of these pink color thing, which is called as papillary muscles attached with the wall of the ventricles later on. Also you can see some of the fibers, some of the cords related attached with these papillary muscles and attached with the valves. That also we are going to discuss the functions later as I move on. Now students, there is a valve which is present between this right atrium and this right ventricle. This valve is called as the tricuspid valves. I have written it over here. This is tricuspid valves. Also you can say that these valves are the atrioventricular valve or AV valve, as it is present between the right atrium and ventricle, or say between the atrium and ventricle. In the same way, there is a valve which is present between the left atrium and left ventricle. That valve is also called as AV valve, but more specifically that valve is called as the bicuspid valves or the mitral valves. So on the right side you have tricuspid valves, on the left side you have got bicuspid valves between the atrium and the ventricles. Alright, now moving on to the next part, this yellow color thing which is present on both the side in the ventricles, this is called as chordae tendineae. Now what is the function of this chordae tendineae? Do you see that this chordae tendineae is attached on one side with this AV valves, on this side also and on this side also, and on the other part these chordae tendineae is attached with these papillary muscles. So that means if I make this is the AV valves present on both these sides. These are attached with the fibers called as the chordae tendineae, which is further attached with the wall of the ventricles. What is the function? This chordae tendineae is never going to show the backward movement. It never shows the backward movement. Why? Because it is attached with the chordae tendineae, and that chordae tendineae is attached with the wall of the ventricle. So there won't be any backward movement. That's the function of the chordae tendineae. Alright, now students, the deoxygenated blood as it moves from the right atrium goes to the right ventricle. From the right ventricle it is going to be carried from the pulmonary artery to the lungs for oxygenation. Now this pulmonary artery, did I make two divisions? Is because pulmonary artery is one pair. Pulmonary artery is one pair carrying the deoxygenated blood for oxygenation towards your lungs. Now from the lungs, the oxygenated blood after oxygenation is coming back to your heart. Right? So that means we are talking about double circulation, because the blood is flowing twice through the heart before reaching the tissue. How many pulmonary veins do you have? You have got two pair. I've just made one pair. But you have got two pair, one pair coming from the right side, other pair coming from the left side, and this dumps the oxygenated blood into your left atrium. From the left atrium, passing through the bicuspid valves, it is going into your left ventricle. And from the left ventricle, it is going to be supplied to the whole body part that you know via aorta. So the blood vessel that is the biggest one carrying blood to the all body parts is aorta. Do you see any valves in aorta and in the pulmonary artery? Definitely yes, because do you see this purple color valve I have made? These valves are called as the SL valves or semilunar valves. If you are saying the valves of aorta, it is simply called as aortic semilunar valve. These valves of the pulmonary artery, it is called as pulmonary semilunar valves. I hope the valves are very much clear. But besides these valves, you have got some other valves as well, like Thebesian valve, like Eustachian valve. So I have told you about a cavity, a sinus present in the right atrium. That's this, coronary sinus. The coronary sinus is having a valve called as Thebesian valve. Also students, do you think your inferior vena cava needs some valves? Inferior vena cava that brings blood from the lower body part has a tendency that the backward flow will take place. But there is a valve in the inferior vena cava called as the Eustachian valve. You don't have any valve in the pulmonary veins because of the oblique opening into the left atrium. Since they open obliquely, so there is no valves in the pulmonary vein. Okay, now students, if I ask you questions, how many valves in your heart is related with the deoxygenated blood? What would be your answer? Just count it. Number 1, the Eustachian valve present in the inferior vena cava, the Thebesian valve present in the coronary sinus, 2, then the tricuspid valve, 3, and then you have pulmonary semilunar valves, 4. Got it? Now I have mentioned about 2 things which is seen during the fetal stage. Students, in the fetal stage, we show a type of mixed circulation. Yes, we show a type of mixed circulation. Why? Because of the presence of certain openings. During the fetal stage, we have certain opening present between this right atrium and left atrium. Right atrium and left atrium. That opening causes all the flow of blood from the right atrium to the left atrium. But why do you need so? Why do you need to pass all the blood from the right atrium to the left atrium? Because in the embryonic stage, we know during the fetal stage, we don't have functional lungs. We cannot send our blood to the lungs because there is no air. So you need to bypass that. So all the blood from the right side of your heart is passed to the left side of the heart, from the right atrium to the left atrium, as there is an opening between these two called as foramen ovale. So foramen ovale closes after birth to form fossa ovalis. So fossa ovalis is the closed structure, foramen ovale is the open structure. Also students, if in some case some blood is passed through the right ventricle, so we also have an opening between this aorta and the pulmonary artery during the fetal stage. That opening is called as ductus arteriosus, which also closes after birth to form ligamentum arteriosum. So both the requirements is to bypass the blood to the lungs, as the lungs are not functional. So just remember all the valves, all the blood vessels, their number, etc. In the next part, we will be discussing about some of the other special tissues called as nodal tissues of the heart. Now students, let's talk about again an important part of the chapter, which is the conducting system of your heart. Now conducting system of the heart, you need to understand that in your heart there are special muscle fibers through which your impulse can be generated. Now see, we say that our heart is myogenic. It's not neurogenic, it's myogenic. When you say your heart is myogenic, that means heart itself has the ability to generate its own action potential. You don't need any signal from your brain to initiate that impulse. And yes, it is true that your heart, human heart, is myogenic because it is auto-excitable. It can generate its own action potential. We'll see how. Now let's look at these special nodal tissues and their location in the heart. Now talking about the very first, this is the atria and this is the ventricle. Very first thing that I have located in the heart is SA node. SA node stands for, on this side I have written sinoatrial node. Now this sinoatrial node location, look at guys, location is top right corner of the right atrium. I have written it on the other side of the board. It is located at the top right corner of the right atrium. Alright, that is SA node. Now the property of SA node, see I have made the arrow on both the atria and I have made the arrow towards your another node which is AV node. When you talk about the SA node, whenever the SA node is generating, it is generating its own action potential, which is why you say that SA node is called as the pacemaker of your heart. SA node is pace. Pace means the heartbeat. It can generate its own action potential 70 to 75 times per minute, which is why the SA node is called as pacemaker of heart. And what happens when it generates its own action potential? It sends the information to the AV node and also to both the atria. Once it is sending information to both the atria, what is happening is atria is getting depolarized. Atria is getting depolarized, and whenever there is depolarization of atria, your atria will start to contract. And when you say it is going to contract, what is happening is atrial systole. So atrial depolarization leads to atrial systole. Got it? Now moving on, from the pacemaker, from the SA node, impulse is being sent to the another node which is called as atrioventricular node or AV node. Now talking about AV node is located at the lower left corner of the right atrium. Located on the lower left corner of the right atrium. It is called as pace setter. Now why it is called as pace setter, students, is because the impulse transmission across the AV node, the impulse transmission across the AV node will be slower. There is a reason why, because we want, as soon as your SA node has generated impulse, your atria is contracting, right? So we want this contraction to be complete. If the impulse is sent very quickly, fastly from SA node to AV node and very fastly from AV node to bundle of His, what is going to happen? The atrial contractions won't be complete. Alright, that is why the AV node is called as pace setter of your heart, because the impulse transmission across the AV node is comparatively slower. When it is going to send the information from the AV node is going to send the information to something located here in between the septum, that is called as bundle of His. In short, I have written it as BOH. And from the bundle of His, it is going to send the information to these one located at the side of the ventricles, called as Purkinje fibers. So SA node to AV node to bundle of His to Purkinje fibers. As soon as the information is in the Purkinje fibers, since it is located at the site of the ventricles, your ventricles will start to contract. And ventricles contract, why? Because there is a depolarization of ventricles, and when there is a depolarization of ventricles, that leads to ventricular systole. And this conducting system, now students, is very useful to understand the next process, which is called as cardiac cycle. Now students, let's start with the cardiac cycle. Talking about the cardiac cycle, I have made actually on the left side, on this side of the board, the right pump of your heart, and on this side I have made the left pump of the heart, and in between I have shown the cardiac cycle, not in the cycle form. We'll show in the gist how the cycle looks, but I have made a flow chart to understand it more clearly. Now talking about both the pumps first, talking about this, the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava is going to bring the deoxygenated blood that is filled in the right atrium. The pressure of the right atrium increases. The atrioventricular valves, which is more specifically tricuspid, now you know, is going to open. The filling of the ventricles is taking place rapidly, but this filling is only 70% filling. In the same way, when you look at this side, the pulmonary vein brings the oxygenated blood coming in the left atrium. Left atrium pressure is increasing, your AV valves, more precisely the bicuspid is opening, the left ventricle filling is taking place. But in both the sides, this filling, because of the pressure, is only and only 70%. Only and only 70%. Also after that, on the right side, blood is going in the pulmonary artery. On the left side, the blood is going into the aorta. But how the ventricles on both the sides are completely filled and how the blood is going into your aorta and into your pulmonary artery, how this contraction is taking place with the help of the previous topic that we already discussed, that is the conducting system. Now simultaneously what is happening, students, is the SA node is generating impulse, and now we know that SA node, after generating the impulse, is going to send the impulse to the both atria. Then it sends the impulse to the AV node, which then sends the information to bundle of His, which then sends information to Purkinje fibers. Now students, initially we consider that both the atria and ventricles are in the relaxed state, and we say that it is in the joint diastole state. Both are relaxed. Atria is also relaxed, ventricle is also relaxed. But after this relaxed state, once your SA node starts generating the impulse, SA node sends the information to both the atria. When it sends information to both the atria, what is happening is contraction. Contraction of both the atria, that is atrial depolarization. When the atria is getting depolarized, when the atria is getting contracted, what is happening is called as atrial systole. Atrial depolarization leads to atrial systole, that is for 0.1 second. And surely when your atria is contracting, atrial systole is taking place. What is happening? See, I have made with this arrow, dotted arrow. When atrial systole is taking place, remaining 30% filling on this side of the ventricle, right ventricle, and remaining 30% of the filling on this side of the ventricle is completed. So because of atrial systole, 30% last filling of the ventricles is taking place on both these sides. Now after atrial systole, students, the SA node is also sending information to AV node, and I told you that across the AV node the impulse transmission will be slower. Why do you know that? Why did you need the slower transmission? Is so that the atrial systole is complete before you start contracting your ventricles. Because once AV node is receiving the information, you can see that the AV node is sending the information to bundle of His, and bundle of His is sending information to Purkinje fibers. And Purkinje fibers is located at the sides of the ventricles. So once the Purkinje fibers receives information, ventricles will start to depolarize. That will lead to ventricular systole, and by this time atria is relaxed, called as atrial diastole. So when the ventricle systole for 0.3 seconds, ventricles are contracting, blood is rapidly rushed into, on this side, aorta, and on this side, your pulmonary artery. But students, before the ventricular contractions, do you need to close any valves? If you start to contract your ventricles, if you start doing ventricular systole, before you close the valves that is present between atria and ventricles on this side and this side, the blood will turn to backflow. But that means before ventricular systole and after atrial systole, what you close is your AV valves. Tricuspid valves on this side and bicuspid valves on this side, which leads to the production of first heart sound called as lub. So lub is the first heart sound, that is because of the closure of AV valves. When the AV closes, it produces the heart sound lub. Clear? Now when the ventricle systole is taking place, blood went into the pulmonary artery and into the aorta. Again, to prevent the backflow, you closed the valves present in both. aortic semilunar valves and pulmonary semilunar valves, which is called as dub. Clear? So closure of AV valves, love, closure of SL valves, that is dub, which is second heart sound. Also, there is a trick to remember one more difference between these. L is love for L. Remember, it is for lower pitch and longer duration. Love is lower pitch and for longer duration, and exactly opposite for dub. Clear? With the cardiac cycle, after beta dub, when the blood went into the aorta and into the pulmonary artery, both the ventricles are now going to relax. When the both ventricles comes to relaxation, that's when you say joint diastole, which is for 0.4 seconds. Now let me first ask you certain questions related with this. This is not yet complete. We are going to talk about the cardiac output and stroke volume, this and that. But before that, if I ask you questions, students, that what is the time duration between lub and dub, then what will be your answer? What is the time duration between lub and dub? So you see, this is the lub, and after lub, what is happening is ventricular systole, and after ventricular systole, then dub. That means lub and dub, in between them only 0.3 seconds. If I ask you what is the time duration between dub and lub, you are not going to move like this. From dub and lub again 0.3 seconds. No, because it's a cycle. So after dub, joint diastole for 0.1 second, 0.4 second, then again atrial systole for 0.1 second, and then lub. So that means 0.4 plus 0.1, that is 0.5 seconds between dub and lub. Also remember one more thing, that whenever you describe this cardiac cycle, atrial systole plus atrial diastole will always be equal to 0.8 second, and ventricular systole plus ventricular diastole will also be equal to 0.8 second. When you are saying one cardiac cycle means it is 0.8 seconds. Why it is 0.8 seconds is because, can you see, in one cardiac cycle you have one lub and one dub. Lub, dub, that is your one heartbeat. And you know that heart beats for 72 times in 1 minute. So if you calculate the time duration for one beat, that will be 72 by 60 seconds, and that comes around 60 by 72, this is 1 minute equals to 60 seconds, and then you have 72 beats, that is like this. So 72 beats in 1 minute, that means 1 beat in 60 by 72, that comes around 0.8 seconds duration of one cardiac cycle. Now we will be discussing some more important points with the cardiac cycle. Now students, this is actually the cycle that you are very much familiar with, which we have already discussed. Now see, this is a cycle, one cardiac cycle for 0.8 seconds. I have divided these cycles into phases, 0.1 second for atrial systole, 0.3 seconds for ventricular systole, and 0.4 seconds for the joint diastole. We just now discussed that between atrial systole and ventricular systole, what is there is the first heart sound, lub, and between the ventricular systole and the joint diastole, what you have is the dub. So between dub and lub, can you see 0.4 second plus 0.1 second, that is 0.5 seconds. Also I have written a term called as heart murmuring or heart murmur. What do you understand by the word meaning murmuring? What you must be doing even right now. Murmuring is something called as, talking unnecessary, disturbing, which students usually do when the teachers are teaching in the class. Anyway, murmuring means something abnormal sound. When you are saying heart murmuring is the abnormal heart sounds which may be produced because of the damage in the valves. So if there is a damage in the valves improper closure is going to produce certain abnormal sound which is called as heart murmuring. So this is the gist of what we just now did about the cardiac cycle. Now students, some important definitions. On the top I have written cardiac output is equal to the stroke volume into heart rate. Heart rate, we all know that it is 72 beats per minute. What is the stroke volume? When you define stroke volume is defined as the I have written the value 70 ml per beat. When I say the stroke volume, which is 70 ml per beat, stroke volume is defined as the amount of blood that is pumped by each ventricle per beat. See, per beat. Amount of blood, I have written here the definition is the amount of blood pumped by each ventricle per beat. That is 70 ml per beat, and this value can vary. Okay, this is not fixed, this can vary, this is the average. When you are defining cardiac output, you can easily define by the units, right? Cardiac output is the amount of blood that your each ventricle pumps in per minute. Okay, that is the amount pumped by each ventricle per minute. When you calculate it, that is approximately 5040 ml per minute or 5 liters per minute. So if I ask you, can you vary your cardiac output? Your answer would be yes. You can vary your stroke volume, you can vary your heart rate, and that's how you can vary your cardiac output. In fact, students, in athletes, in sports person, cardiac output is very, very high. Cardiac output can be even 5 times more, which is seen in the athletes. So what they do is very fast pumping. It is not that they have got more blood. What is happening? There is a fast pumping seen in case of athletes. So cardiac outputs can be 5 times more seen in the athletes. So that's the gist about your cardiac cycle and the different terms, stroke volume, cardiac output and everything. In the next class, students, we are going to start with the fresh topic, which is electrocardiogram or electrocardiograph. So before you start with the next class, just go through what is electrocardiograph, what is electrocardiogram, what is the machine, what is the graph. We are going to discuss this topic in our next class. Till then, take care, tata, bye bye.